Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the County Seat. I'm your host, Chad Booth, today, and we are very pleased to have a very good and a special edition today. We're going to be talking about rural county issues, which is not uncommon for our show, but this conversation is going to be based on the governor's effort to put 25,000 jobs into 25 of Utah's rural counties. It's an easy task to turn a slogan into, but actually converting it into something real is a little bit difficult. So we're going to delve into some of the history of rural Utah and how we got to this point where we are now looking at trying to find a way to even help the small counties. And we are going to look at different ways and approaches and maybe a couple of models where we can perhaps have some success at this instead of just having another catchy phrase in a program. Joining us for our discussion today, Mike McCandless, who is the Government Relations Director for Prolific Mining, and he's also a member of the Governor's Rural Partnership Board on the Executive Committee. Also joining us, Wes Curtis, who's the Director of the Utah Center for Rural Life at Southern Utah University, and also a member of the Governor's Executive Committee on the Rural Partnership Board. Gents, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
It's good to be here.
I appreciate you taking the time to wander all the way out from rural Utah just to have this conversation.
Any conversation with you is worth traveling for.
Flatter me not, Wes. Flatter me not. Okay, so I think we probably ought to get a little background of just how we got to where we are with rural Utah. You know, when I was young, I remember traveling through rural Utah pre-freeway days, and you know, you'd head to St. George, and Holden was a town. I mean, they had services there, and Fillmore, and Meadow, and Kanosh, and you had all these little communities that you went to on your way down there, and they were all kind of relatively close in size. Then all of a sudden, some have shriveled up, and others have exploded. How did that happen?
A lot of that probably had something to do with the interstate that bypassed a lot of these. You used to drive right through Main Street on these little towns on the way to St. George. And then what communities did in relation to that interstate going through the state made a lot of difference in whether they succeeded or whether they didn't succeed. And there were a lot of other factors involved as well.
I think another one that's really changed was that natural resource extraction economy that was so prevalent in so many of those communities. You had millions of dollars invested in a community like Moab in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s, you know, in those extractive industries in uranium and in the coal industry in Carbon and Emery County. So you had a lot of outside investment that was coming in, you know, kind of keeping those communities awash in money in times. But the problem was the boom and bust cycle. That's been something that's been a challenge of all rural communities, but in particular natural resource economies. You know, so the oil booms and bust cycles in the Uinta Basin, and the coal boom and bust cycles, and the uranium boom and bust cycles. So that's been the history. But now we've entered into a new situation where we've busted, but the new booms are not coming back. You know, we're not seeing some of those resource or those extractive industries coming back. Timber's a really good example. You know, there were southern Utah communities that for 100 years were dependent on timber. It's not coming back. And so now what?
Yeah, we've entered a new economy. It's a new national economy, a new global economy. And the extractive industries, our ability to compete in agriculture, those things just aren't what they used to be in rural Utah. And so just like all others who survive, you have to adapt. And some communities have adapted better than others. Some have had better opportunities for change than others. But the bottom line is things are different than they used to be in many different ways.
So how did, you know, how does somebody get to the point where they're able to even predict or cope with this? I mean, the decay is slow, but you've got counties right now that just, it almost seems like it's impossible for them to get on their feet. You know, you've got Paiute County. It used to be a fairly strong little community. You can tell by the relics of buildings that are vacated. You know, they've got to a place, but you know, how did the decay happen? In a short answer.
Well, I think that really comes down to their ability to adapt. You know, they whether that comes from somebody internally or externally, typically what really has to happen is somebody's got to step up and show some leadership. And in some of those cases, either that has not been able to occur or they haven't followed. There may have been some of that leadership present and people haven't followed. And so that's been a real challenge in all of rural Utah is basically finding champions, whether that be an institution like education or a business entity or individual that can actually kind of see a vision of where they need to head next.
And I will echo that, Chad. Leadership is a key here, whether it's at the governor's level or whether it's at the local level. And I can tell you in every instance where you've seen some kind of progress or success in a rural community, you can point to the specific leader or leaders who made that happen. It really, that is the catalyst, the key ingredient to making things happen in a rural community or really anywhere.
Well, this is a good place to take a break. I think I would like to come back and talk about how bad the situation is in some of our rural communities, because I don't think people on the Wasatch Front know, and also to take a look at some case studies on how some have got on their feet and how some of them didn't. We'll be right back with the County Seat.
There is a place where looking out means looking in, where an impression lasting only a few seconds will be imprinted on a life forever, where courage is forged and innocence rediscovered, where remembering is rewarding and forgetting unforgettable. There is a place where truth is felt and where seeing is believing. There is a place.
It's one more, here we go again. I tell myself I'm not in love, but one more time is not enough. One last kiss and then you were gone, and I'm here wishing you could stay a little longer. Stay a little longer. Wishing you could stay a little longer.
The Utah Farm Bureau began as a collection of farmers supporting each other to raise the food we enjoy. Today, Farm Bureau membership encompasses everyone, whether ranchers, growers, or just everyday folks like you and me. Members enjoy discounts on items like vehicles and ATVs, or insurance that's very affordable. You don't have to be a farmer to join, and dues are small, but together we make a big difference in keeping our food supply local and abundant. Join Utah Farm Bureau.
Welcome back to the County Seat. We are discussing today the situation in rural Utah. A lot of attention's been paid to an effort to try and change that with the governor's office challenging to find 25,000 rural jobs in 25 rural counties. And we were in the midst of that discussion. You know, there's kind of a disconnect. And I will read a report in the paper or online somewhere. I'll look at something and it'll say, oh, well, you know, they've got an unemployment rate that's not too bad right now. You know, it's up a little bit there at, you know, like 8-9%. But, you know, and you look at it in regards to the country, you go, well, that's pretty good. But then you drive out to that community and you drive down Main Street and half the buildings are boarded up and every other house is for sale. So why is there a disconnect between what we're being told and what's actually happening?
Well, the truth is the unemployment rate does not begin to tell the full story of what's going on in some of our rural counties, particularly the energy producing counties. For example, and this is probably the worst case example, but in Uinta County, I did a little presentation in February of this year, and I entitled it Utah's Silent Recession, because what's happening in places like Uinta County, their unemployment rate is 6.9%, which is troubling enough. But the truth is they've lost 23% of their jobs, a 23% decline in their economic base, essentially. And so when you lose 23% of your jobs, just to put that in perspective, if Salt Lake County were to lose 23% of their jobs, that would be 140,000 jobs that would be lost. We've never experienced anything like that in a metropolitan area in Utah. And so what does that mean for Uinta County when the retail businesses that are left there don't have customers coming in, the schools that they've had to expand and grow don't have students in the classrooms, you don't need the teachers you used to have, the bonds you may have floated to pay for this infrastructure, now you don't have the means to pay for them. This is pretty serious, what's going on in some of these counties right now.
And it gets driven home when you start to see the Main Street, you know, so you go to a community like Price, you know, through conditions not as their own, but we've lost Kmart, we've lost JCPenney, we've lost Route 21, we've lost a series of what typically were filling up the, you know, the malls, the little strip malls along the main part of town, and one after another they leave and nothing replaces them. And so that then kind of starts to move from that primary area of the mine, the job loss of the mine jobs, now you're moving to that second, you know, the wife's employment and the wife's income or the kids' income, they start to go away. And so it starts to have that rippling effect, you know, as those things start to disappear and nothing replaces them.
So there's got to be a reverse side of this too. So for every time there's been this kind of a downturn, you look at, and we were talking about the show, you know, Parowan is the county seat of Iron County, but it's just a dinky little town now. It's almost forgotten. No offense to all you folks that live in Parowan. I love the town and everything, but, you know, Cedar City has exploded. Why? How come there's just winners and losers to the degree we see them in rural Utah?
Well, in the instance you mentioned, Chad, and I've pointed this out on several occasions, Parowan should be the major city in Iron County, but it's not because of a decision made over 100 years ago when Cedar City got the charter for a university. Back then it was a branch normal school. The university is what has made the big difference in Cedar City. It's what's made a big difference in St. George. It's made a big difference in Carbon County. Having those types of institutions and bringing students in and the faculty and stuff that go with that, but also just what spins out of those things and the amenity it is for attracting other people to the community. Those types of things make a really big difference.
So you're in essence saying that because Dixie College is in St. George, that one single thing changed?
That's one of those catalyst events that occurred that allowed things to happen. The interstate, you know, you could actually classify education as another piece of infrastructure. So the lack of infrastructure is one of the big things that drives the challenges we're talking about today. But it's not it's not sewer pipes and water lines, it's things like education. It's things like a large fiber optic line or a large power line. I can't tell you how many times Wes and I have been involved in meetings where we have electrical power in a community, but we don't have adequate for the expansion that a company would like to do. And going through the regulatory process to bring in 50 jobs into Milford is completely different than the regulatory process to bring in 1,000 jobs into Salt Lake. There's just an awful lot of support for that, but that 50 jobs is really hard to get people to catch the vision of what you're trying to accomplish.
And yet if you take Wayne County, that 50 jobs is like 200 or 300,000 in Salt Lake.
Well, in most of our rural counties, that's the case. We aren't looking for big jobs. Amazon would not fit anywhere in rural Utah. We could not support something like that. But 50 jobs, 25 jobs, that can make a huge difference in some of our little communities.
Well, we've set the stage, and I know that there have been just a whole bunch of government attempts and programs and acronyms through my time watching things, and we've got yet another. I would like to spend the next segment just talking about, from a couple of guys that have been boots on the ground, what it's going to take to actually make some of these really small communities thrive. What does it, if you had a magic wand and the governor said, you do whatever you want, we'll do it and make it happen, I'd like to know what your thoughts are on that. We'll do that right after we come back with County Seat.
What would you do with an extra day in Utah Valley? Explore the Wasatch Mountains? Snap a family photo at Bridal Veil Falls. Cool off on Utah Lake or the Provo River. No matter what you're searching for, you can find it in Utah Valley. Bring everyone together.
149 million years in the making, dinosaurs once roamed this land. Now they're found at the Dinosaur National Monument. Let's take you beyond the bones. We call it Dinosaur Land. You'll find it offers adventures and sights not seen anywhere else in the world. Come to Dinosaur Land, Vernal, Utah. You'll want to stay forever. The dinosaurs did.
The Layton Hills Mall offers more than just shopping. Bring the whole family and enjoy SeaQuest Interactive Aquarium to feed the fish and exotic birds, hold live reptiles, and even swim with the stingrays. Or pump up the action and visit Dartside, Utah's premier soft foam dart tag arena. And don't forget the Great Room Escape, where you can challenge your friends to solving mysteries inside themed rooms. So come and experience great fun at the Layton Hills Mall and visit playindavis.com for other great activities.
We all assume that the food we eat is safe, but how do you know? Well, it starts on the farm and continues every step of the way to your local grocery store. So when you bring home food, you do so with the peace of mind that it's safe, fresh, and nutritious, thanks to the Utah Department of Agriculture and Food, the guardians of Utah's food supply and sustainable agriculture. Learn more by visiting ag.utah.gov.
Welcome back to the County Seat. We are talking about issues in rural Utah, the 25,000 jobs in 25 counties, wanting to make sure that even the smallest communities have a shot at really having a change or an impact. So here's the magic wand. I'm handing it over to you guys. The governor's staff will do whatever you want. So let's start with it. What do we do?
I'm a hunter, and the best way to find out how to hunt deer is to know where they're not. We have a lot of experience in knowing what doesn't work. I mean, one of the things that I think Wes and I would both agree on is that what we really don't need is just another program. I've been doing economic development in one form or another since '93, and I've probably seen no less than 20 to 25 efforts to create a new program. There were smart cities and smart sites and smart this and smart that, all kinds of acronyms, all kinds of political support, but they seem to die within 6 to 9 months. So I think the one thing we don't want to do is just have a quote-unquote program. What we have to have is a change or a paradigm shift in the way we go about doing economic development. It's a change in the way that rural folks support themselves. And Wes mentioned it a lot earlier. I think it really initially comes down to leadership. Finding people within those communities and at the state level, both, who can serve in a role to find a way to coalesce ideas and bring people together to make things happen. So many of the communities just don't have a sense of, I want it to be this way forever. I was born like, it was like this when I was a kid, I want it to stay like that. Well, that's a challenge.
Yeah, it is, but there's also a problem with that, though, because you take the paper plant in Juab County, and you're probably familiar with it because you were kind of in a holding pattern on that whole thing. There was leadership at the county, and they got up and they rolled up their sleeves and they said, you know what? The cookie cutter thing is not going to be enough, and we want to look down the road not for this one, but their expansion, the next 3 or 4 businesses, and so we'll make the extra effort and investment to find the water and get the rail and get the interchange put in, and then the state balks at it and say, wait a minute, you're stepping on our
But see, I
toes.
think you covered the important part, that the state balked, and why do we get some balking either from state or industry? And it's a perception problem. There's a consistent perception that rural Utah can't deliver. So regardless of the size of the project, we've faced multiple times when we've had opportunities that get shot down because someone believes that we can't find the workforce, as an example. When in reality, when we have a new coal mine open in Carbon in Emery County, and something, I've seen this multiple times in my career, we have 200 employees that show up within a matter of days.
I was going to say, people move to jobs. People want to live in rural Utah.
But people who haven't been through that just believe it can't happen. And so there's these perception issues. So even when you have a county like Juab that stepped up, what stopped them in that case was a lack of understanding of that they really could deliver on what they committed to deliver.
Yeah, and I want to give the governor a kudo here because he's a governor of the highest performing economy in the nation. And he's not just resting on those laurels. He's recognizing that everything isn't where it should be.
Yeah.
And I give him credit for that. And that type of leadership, focusing those resources, I promise you a lot of his department heads who never gave a thought about rural are suddenly realizing that better be a priority for some of the stuff we're doing in our department.
Right. He's made that clear. He's so well traveled into the rural part of the state, but somehow in that whole process from top down to bottom, it seems like some things are being missed.
Well, and here's the sad reality. The investment in rural is so paltry compared to the investment in the Wasatch Front. For example, take U-Star. Tens of millions of dollars have been invested in that program. We see incentives on the order of tens of millions of dollars for various large companies coming to the Wasatch Front. The largest single investment in economic development I'm aware of was the 21st Century Communities program back in about 2000. That was $750,000. Our Rural Fast Track program is inching towards getting $1 million a year. The disparity in that level of investment and focus on our rural communities is huge.
It is, and there's a number of legislators who are starting to catch that vision, you know, that they understand, hey, if we can take cars off the highway and along the Wasatch Front and relocate them. I actually think we have some great leadership within the legislative branch as well. What we need is a clearer vision about how do we actually deliver on some of these promises. It's not new programs, it's a change in the way that we communicate and we lead to get people to really believe that a community like Nephi can deliver. It
seems to me that part of the problem too, because I mean, you brought it up earlier when you said there's no way that Amazon could locate in Hinckley and have anything good come from it. But it seems to me that part of the formula that we have to work out is trying to find the right size.
I still do a little bit of work for a firm called Epic Engineering based in Heber City. We have offices in 3 or 4 states now, based in a small rural community that's growing rapidly, but that's an industry, as an example, engineering field where they could be located in Blanding, they could be located in Boulder, Escalante. There's really no reason with the technology that company.
Sunrise left Salt Lake and moved to Fillmore.
Yeah, there are industries where those kinds of changes.
And here's my magic wand. If I could do one thing right, one of the things I would do right now is I would deliver a world-class coding training to every middle school and high school student in rural Utah, because you can do those jobs anywhere. And we have companies here in the Silicon Slopes wanting those kind of employees. They can live in their towns and work for Adobe, but we don't have those skills in our rural communities. That's something we need to be focusing on. We have better bandwidth in our rural counties than most any place else in the nation that's rural. The Eastern Seaboard still doesn't have basic broadband in many of their communities. We do, and we're not capitalizing on that or on the expertise we have here in the Wasatch Front in IT.
So it's trying to get those connections to those small towns?
Yes, deliver that education. And Mike, you're a big proponent of that education component.
Yeah, I mean, you've got to have that ability to have those educational facilities reach out and become leaders.
Great. We're going to take a quick break. We're going to come back and we're going to finish up this conversation and talk about the Rural Summit, which is a great way to get started on that conversation. It's coming up down in Cedar City, and we'll get some final thoughts. We'll be right back with the county seat.
Look south to adventure. Look south to beauty. Look south to San Juan County. Out here, the road goes on forever, and what you'll find will change how you see the world. Climb on your OHV and discover forgotten landscapes and vistas that challenge the imagination. From Blanding and Monticello to the cliff faces of Monument Valley, we're open and ready for you to explore. San Juan County, Utah's Canyon Country.
There's a little place on a Utah map where I was raised, where my heart's at, where the sagebrush grows wild and high, and the stars come out at night. Oh, there ain't nothing like being raised in the basin with the Ute reservation, skiing, starvation, that Duchesne County life.
Prepare to be demolished at the Juab County Fair in Nephi, Utah, August 7th through the 12th. Prepare for the extraordinary as we push the limits of excitement at one county fair that changes all the rules. Rodeos and demolition derbies are just the icebreakers and an event that makes teenagers face their fears in front of the crowd and takes robots and cupcakes to a whole new level. Think you know county fairs? Think again. August 7th through the 12th in Nephi, Utah. It's the Juab County Fair. Find out what makes us different.
Welcome back to the county seat. We are finishing up our conversation today. We mentioned something called the Rural Summit. This is an event that I've had an opportunity to go to several years in a row. It has really helped me understand the issues of rural Utah. It's a great event. If you're in business, if you're in government, you've not heard of it, Wes, tell us a little bit about it.
Well, the Utah Rural Summit is something we do every year. And in fact, this is the 30th anniversary of the Utah Rural Summit. And that makes it the longest running rural economic development conference in the nation. And we're quite proud of that. And not just because of the conference, but because what it means for rural. Because we've been coming together and talking about ideas and possibilities for that long. And it makes a difference, I truly believe. This year's Rural Summit is going to focus, in fact, we'll dedicate an entire afternoon to the Governor's 25,000 Jobs Initiative. And so that's going to be a big component of the Rural Summit. But we're going to set the stage for that in a unique way. We've got Natalie Gochner and the Kim Gardner Institute who've been working with us over the last month or so to create and present a Marshall Plan for rural revitalization. And she is going to present that at the summit.
Ooh, this sounds very exciting.
It is. I think this is it has the potential to shift things in a major way should people decide to embrace this and push for it. We've also got former Governor Mike Leavitt will be our concluding speaker at the summit, and I think he brings a unique perspective of having been all around the globe as well as having been a governor here in Utah. And I'm curious to see what he observes from his vantage point when he speaks at the summit.
Mike, any last words?
No, I appreciate the opportunity.
Excellent. We appreciate the opportunity to have the county seat in your home every weekend. Thank you for watching. Be sure to share this with your friend. Remember, local government is where your life happens. Be involved, be part of the solution. Share this with your friends, and we'd love your feedback on our social media. We will answer. There are people in this room that will talk back to you. We'll see you next week on the county seat.